Hello and welcome for another episode of this season of Try This on Wisp Sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kirstin Lauritzen, and I am so excited because today we are going to answer a question that came in over social media from one of our listeners, and it's a really, really good one. It's a follow-up from a question on the previous episode where I had Dr. Nicole Woodard with me, and we talked about briefly in there how to differentiate, or we talked about that there are some situations where you can try to differentiate between a pain that comes up during a workout and whether that's something that should cause you to stop, or if that's something where, you might be able to make an evaluation and make some changes, and maybe it's due to underfueling. So we're going to get into that in a little bit. I wanted to talk about an update as far as training goes. This last week, I had some decent training. I'm getting a little bit frustrated because our swimming sessions are constantly being fussed with. It feels like I think there's maybe some politics going on at the pool, and that's making things a little bit difficult. I also know that I live in a state in the United States where there are a lot of politics going on, and so it's an interesting thing to deal with as an athlete. So I think we'll be able to keep our swims, but it sounds like I have Saturday swims through the end of October, and then there will probably be some adjustments to be made at that point, which is sort of frustrating because, especially when it comes to training, this is something that is important to me. And it's unfortunate when it feels like there are so many things kind of working against that you don't really have a whole lot of control over. And that's mostly because I really want to swim with the Masters swim team more than anything. I get really good coaching there. I get really good workouts there. And it's something that I really like to do because it's like one of my only workouts where I get to be with people. So that's important to me. Yes, of course, I could always go to a pool and just do, an open lane swim and whatever. And that's fine as well. But, it's nice to be able to swim with a team, and I really enjoy the people there. I like my coach. So, it's just stuff like that. It just makes it a little bit trickier, but that's okay. I'm still trying to get in my 4 days a week. Although, this last week, over the weekend, I wasn't feeling very well. So I didn't do a whole lot of training this weekend, just tried to recover and get better as quickly as possible. So this week I have swims. I will be doing 3 swims this week. The 4th is usually on Saturday, but this Saturday I have a 5K run walk that I am running. I'm not like actually a participant. I'm hosting it. I am helping to put it on. So Saturday, I will be doing a lot of being on the other side of races, which will be very interesting. And then I have some bikes and some runs, but we're taking it a little bit easy this week so that I can recover and kind of get back into it. So that's what the week looks like. And I realized, I think the reason why we had originally done this section of these episodes is so that people could so that you could really see that training for things like Ironmans, training for things like half Ironmans and triathlon really aren't as big of an endeavor as people really seem to think that it is. I think you can average about 10 to 12 hours a week, which is totally doable because you can put a lot of those kind of heavier hours on the weekends. And as you've heard on these episodes as well, I'm fussing with my schedule a little bit where I go to bed a little bit earlier and then I wake up a little bit earlier, and it doesn't necessarily impact a whole lot my day to day as far as the things that I get done. And if I did have kids, I could absolutely get that training done before they were up and things like that. So I the reason for that, and I'm not sure if I'm going to continue on with this section of like updates on training, we'll kind of see, but the point was to be able to show and at least just explain that it's not as difficult to put into your life as you'd think. And for the most part, I think for me, it just by having something to train for, it really helps me be able to stay focused and get training in and get movement in and exercise and things like that. There's some people I think that like exercise and training is just something that's in their routine and it's easy for them to just keep doing and they don't necessarily need to be training for a particular goal. For me, though, I'm one of the kinds of people that does need something to be training for, which, there's no judgment on either side, which side you're on, but I think you need to understand yourself and what you need in order to do some of the things that we know are really good for us. And I know that that's my thing. So right now I'm into triathlon, and that's what I need in order to make sure I'm getting into the gym and getting my exercise in. So that's what I do. Okay. So let's move on to the main part of this episode, because it's going to be a little bit of a hefty one. And I think it's a really important one. As I mentioned, I got this question in from a listener. She sent it in over social media, and I said, you know what, that would be a great question to answer for an actual episode. Just typing it all out on, social media was going to be a little bit tricky. So the question is, how do I know or differentiate between pain or niggles, as my coach and I have called them in the past, that are from underfueling in a workout versus a pain that may lead to an injury and I need to stop? Like, how do you differentiate between a pain that's something that, you can work through, or it's something that is really a sign that you should probably stop and figure out what's going on before you continue to potentially make the problem worse? So to tackle this question, because it's actually a bigger question than you would think. To tackle this first, we really need to understand stress, right? So first and foremost, we need to understand that training in and of itself is a stress. It's a stressor. It's dose dependent, and generally it's considered a good stress. We want that stress because I think when people hear the word stress, they kind of tend to go, oh, that's bad. Right. But stress isn't necessarily bad, right? Like stress is in many ways a good thing. Stress helps you get out of bed, right? So cortisol, it goes up in the morning, which it's supposed to, because that's what gets you out of bed. It's also supposed to tailor off during the day so that when it starts to get dark out, melatonin can kick in, and then that's when you want to go to bed. And then cortisol goes up again around 8 a.m. ish, and that's what literally helps you get going with your day. So stress in and of itself isn't technically a bad thing. Also, stress, I keep doing like the, finger quotation marks when I say stress. But stress helps you to perform well. It helps you to show up and actually prepare and do well on a test or do well on a presentation that you have for work. Stress is supposed to be situational and actually a good thing. In this also sense too, stress can help with your body being able to adapt to exercise. So it's dose dependent in this case, and it's actually a good thing. It produces a good result. But what we often don't do sometimes with training, and I think this goes across the board for every athlete, for whether you're somebody who just trains and goes to the gym and that's kind of just your thing and you just do it to stay healthy, or if you're an elite or pro athlete, what we also need to consider is life stress in this equation too. Because what I see across the board is that that we're kind of ignoring those other factors, right? Like let's take into example some of the like really stressful things that can happen in life, like moving. I think moving houses or locations is one of the more stressful life events, or like building a house, for example. It doesn't really matter which whether you're moving or whether you're building your own house, like either spectrum of that is stressful, and it's a lot of stress, but people don't really see that all the time. They just kind of are like, oh, well, these are just things that I'm doing. Or they'll be like, oh yeah, well, I have kids and I'm also right now in a, online master's program so that I can, get a better job or get an increase of pay at my job. And then, oh yeah, well, I'm also training for this like Ironman or half Ironman, or, and then I've got, all these other things going on at work. And, oh yeah, I'm also, head of PTA, or, oh yeah, I'm also, doing something else with some other club. Right. So like they just start to add on, and you kind of look at people and they're like, nah, I'm not really stressed. But if you look at all of the different things, right, that they're involved in, you're like, how are you not, so we tend not to really recognize that all the different things that we do, and that all contributes, right, to your overall load on your system. So The thing that we also need to understand in this is, before I get off on too many tangents, is that when the body is overstressed, we lose fitness instead of gaining it. And this is a critical point to understand, because this is where training more often leads to problems. So I think this is a really good time to explain. I wish that this was a video, and maybe at one point I will put this on my YouTube channel, and I will actually draw this video out for people, or this diagram out for people, because I think it is really important, but I'm going to try to explain it as best as possible. One of the things that you can do is you can go online and you can look at Hans Selye's general adaptation chart, and that will help you with kind of visualizing this process. Okay. You can easily look this up. Quick Google search. If you take into consideration like an 8-week or 10-week training set, that's what I want you to think of when we are going through this process. Okay. So first and foremost, it starts with training. So you're at, if you look at like, a chart that has an X axis and a Y axis. It starts with training at the bottom at 0.0. You train, so you increase stress on the body. And once you've done that training, if you give it enough time, the body will start to adapt. So this happens on like a micro scale of, as far as like every day when you train, this happens, but then it also happens on a macro scale. So over across like an entire training program. Okay. So you train, you absorb that stress, and you adapt. So you go up, and then you see those adaptations, and it like picture a line going up and then starting to level out. And that leveling out is the adaptation to exercise. But what you need is to be able to train, and then get those adaptations. And it should continue to kind of look like a staircase, right? Where you're just kind of going up and adapting, and going up and adapting. However, there's a point along that training program or load where an athlete can enter into an area of what we would call overreaching. This is when we've bypassed those adaptations and the athlete is under enough stress that the body isn't keeping up. For some, this could literally just be from training itself. Like there's so much stress going into the system because there's so much training, or it could be training with a mix of life stressors as well. So we start to enter into this overtraining. So I want you to picture that staircase, right? Where you're going up and then you're adapting. And then instead of going up again, you start to see this dip down. And this is often where athletes tend to see decreased performance. So that's one of the first things, right? So you see this decrease in performance, and athletes and coaches think, oh, so we actually need to increase their training. At this point, this is the wrong time to do that. This is the opposite of what you want to do, because this is where injuries and illnesses often occur. You see this decrease in performance, you increase training, so you increase more stress on the body, and you just enter into that. Instead of overreaching, now we're into overtraining, and that's where those injuries and illnesses just pop up like crazy. So instead of what we need to do in that time frame is actually focus more on better nutrition, more antioxidants at this phase. This is the one time really where you really want to apply those heavily. More sleep, more rest, and lighter workouts while we turn the ship around. And this is really the critical point here. And then once you've done that, you head back into training, and you'll see those performance markers soar upward. And in this fashion, you climb that staircase up, and always, you're just continuing to go up and up and up and up. And you're just always looking for these patterns. So these are certain, there are certain labs that you can, that can tell you what's going on in this phase, but part of it is just tuning into your body and watching your heart rate, especially things like your resting heart rate and heart rate variability. I've talked about this a lot on my Instagram, but you don't need any fancy equipment for either of these. All you need to do is track your heart rate variability. What you can do is do this daily. I use the same heart rate monitor that you can use in your workout, which I know most triathletes have, is one that goes around your chest. All you need is an app on your phone that can track it, and then one of those heart rate monitors, and you just wrap that around yourself in the morning before you even get out of bed. Open that app up and take your heart rate variability, and you can do an average of that, and you can watch it over your training cycle. So if heart rate variability goes down, and if your resting heart rate goes up, it's likely you're heading into overtraining. And again, this is something you can see, over time, right? You're tracking that every single day of this training cycle. And then as it starts, if you see those patterns, then you know that something might be up, right? And so then that's the time to go get some labs. And hopefully you're also working with someone that can help you identify that, right? And this is what is going on. And then you can make changes. This is also where your coach can start to adjust your training to lower the training load while you're also working on recovery. So this is part of where having that team is really important. And that's going back to, again, bringing Dr. Nicole Woodard from the previous episode, in what she was saying is it's really, really important to have a team that you can work with that can help you identify what's going on here. So that's kind of on like a macro scale of what happens across a training program. And that's how you can see if the stress that you are under is more due to like overall life stress and overtraining. And that's going to be a pain that you get that you really want to stop. Like you don't want to continue on. You want to make sure you get that dealt with right away, because if you are in that phase, that is going to lead to an injury. Okay. But there's also another side. So when an athlete isn't eating enough to support their training, it's a form of stress that can impact endurance. It can impact strength. It can impact any speed gains or improvements, increases in speed that you might see. So both overtraining or underfueling put an athlete at risk for injury and also issues with their health. So that's, these are things you want to keep in mind. And especially when it's, when you're talking about overtraining, that's more, that's probably a mix, right? Of doing a lot of training, which is a good thing. Sometimes it needs to happen, but also not necessarily balancing that out very well with nutrition either. And there are definitely some things that could be talked about there and some gaps that could be filled. But when the body is overstressed, right, we lose fitness instead of gaining it. It's a really, really, really critical point to come back to. When an athlete isn't eating enough to support their training, it's a lot of stress. So what can you do? What are some different symptoms that can help differentiate the two? Symptoms of high stress levels would be something like how do you differentiate between whether you're underfueling or whether it's high stress? Symptoms of like very high stress levels, first off, write things down, do a journal. Think about, okay, what are some of the stressors that are going on right now? Do I have a high stress job? Am I, just taking enough time to recover? Am I sleeping well? Am I getting an adequate amount of sleep in my day? And a lot of athletes will say, well, I can't get enough sleep because I need to train. But I would say that then I think we need to kind of think about priorities in a sense of, this is always the hardest thing to say to an athlete, but I think you need to think about priorities, right? So like if you are training, and I know that it's a really big goal that you have, but if it's going to start causing injuries and if it's going to start causing health impacts on your health, well, you can only sustain that for so long. And ideally what we want to do for athletes is say, we want to keep you in this sport for a long time, right? If this is something that you are passionate about and that you like, we want to make sure that you're doing this into your 40s, 50s, 60s, if this is something that you really enjoy doing. So maybe we need to think about maybe extending that goal out as far as years go. So instead of trying to get there in 6 months, maybe we need to think about doing this in a year and a half. We need to decrease your training and allow your body just more time to get to that level of what you're wanting to get to. Otherwise, maybe what we need to do, if we can, is change around some other lifestyle things, like maybe switch jobs, or maybe we need to make some changes in that sense. Hopefully that makes sense, because there's only so much that the body can sustain. So you can push it as far as you want to, but if you push it for too long, too far, you could potentially end up with an injury that keeps you out of that sport forever. So again, I say priorities, right? I think we need to think about what our ultimate goals are and what we're trying to do in the framework of what can the body actually sustain. So symptoms of high stress levels would be things like fatigue, especially like chronic fatigue, like always waking up tired, never feeling rested, could take a nap multiple times a day and still fall asleep, at night, just constantly needing to sleep. That would be high stress levels. Also, on the flip side, though, some people, when they are really stressed, will experience a lot of difficulty sleeping. So not being able to fall asleep very easily, waking up multiple times at night, and not being able to get to bed. Those are all signs that there's just a lot of stress on the system. Daily headaches, lack of motivation, anxiety or depression, irritability. Again, kind of referencing those like aches and pains. If there's like a constant pain that you're continually getting when you're doing a training, like you go out and run and you've got that same hip pain that keeps coming up over and over and over again, that's a pain that and especially if it comes on like at the same time in a workout, or it starts off right off the bat, that's a sign that there's something wrong, and you probably need to go get that checked out, because it could be due to a pattern you're a movement pattern that is causing that pain, right? That's an example that you should probably go and get it checked out. One thing that can be really helpful in this is to journal about your workouts. I know that my coach is going to be listening to this and he's probably going to say something, but like, I know this is an area where I need to improve. But I think part of it is sometimes let's just continue on. My coach does his programming through like an online app, which is really nice because it just goes to my phone and then I can just see it and open it up and know what I need to do. But in those, so when it goes in, my app my watch automatically syncs to that app. So when I do a workout, I don't necessarily have to go in there and write a note about it, but there is a note section in the app where I can say how the workout went. And you know what would be really good and efficient to do, and also great for both of us, would be if I would go in there and write a note about, had really good energy this workout, or this one did not feel well, or I met my, goal pacing, or I met my, this workout in general felt great, or it didn't, right? Those types of notes would be good, because especially if like over and over and over again, things aren't going well, if we both knew that, we could each make changes to it, right? My coach tends to check in with me every week anyway, though, and is definitely helpful as far as like, he'll ask me how the week went, and I'll say like, oh yeah, it went great, or it didn't really go very well. But you can absolutely, track those things. And I do think like communication wise, the more you communicate, the better your coach can do. And I will say this from my side as well, like being somebody who works with athletes on nutrition, it's just so much better if you communicate, because we don't know, we can't read your mind. So if you're not doing well and you're just ignoring it and you're not saying anything, that's not helpful to anybody, not to yourself, not to your coach. And I will say in most cases where, even where situations haven't gone well, like with me coaching an athlete, as far as from nutrition goes, it's usually because of communication, because, we can't read your mind. So those are some symptoms of high stress levels and some ways that you can see over time, like if you're not doing well in your workouts, that's consistent over the board, that things aren't going well, then you might be in that area. And that's something you might need to work on. And I'll say from a personal anecdote there, I've been in a weird season as far as training goes. Like you all know that I'm headed into another race in December down in Palm Springs, and training has been weird. I've had really, really good workouts, and like my swim workouts are going okay. But I've had also some workouts that aren't going very well. And here's the weird thing. When I say that, a lot of, other triathletes will say like, well, take it easy. You just, after triathlons, especially after Ironmans, like it can take a while to get back into it and whatever, but we're several months out from that at this point. but it is a weird thing. Like I'm having times where things are going really well, and then I'm having times where things are not going well at all. And I don't entirely know why. I don't think I'm in this kind of like really chronically stressed, overtrained scenario, but that's something that I'm working on and just trying to figure out on my side, because I can't really figure out why things like the pattern. There really isn't a pattern that I've been able to see yet. And I do track a lot of this on my own. But anyway, those are just things that like, it can be helpful to work with people like coaches or practitioners that can help you kind of decipher some of these things, because it's hard to do it all on your own. So those are just some things to think about. Now, so from the signs of like, if underfueling is going on in a workout, here's some, and also if you're just not eating enough in general, because I would say that's probably a part of it as well. Like, it may not be that you're just underfueling in your workouts, but you also may just not be eating enough in general. So it like throughout the day. So constantly being hungry is one of those. If you are constantly hungry, or have intense cravings, like constantly thinking about food, you need to eat more. And I know that may be hard for some people, but you need to eat more. So keep that in mind. That's a big one, especially if you are getting pain in your workouts and you're hungry. That's a really good sign that you just need to straight up eat more. You can also go back to previous episodes too, where we talk about like calories and carbohydrate needs, and just make sure that you're actually getting enough in your longer workouts. That's pretty critical. Fatigue is also another symptom here, but it's not quite the same as that chronic fatigue where, you're not being able to wake up, or you're not feeling rested, where you feel like you constantly need to take a nap. It's more of like a situational fatigue, like just have no energy to get a workout done at the end of the day type thing. That's often a sign that you just haven't been eating enough in general. GI distress can be a sign of an issue with the type of fueling that you are taking in. And then because of that, you are you're just not being able to absorb the type of fuel that you're putting in there. So that's something to think about and something to troubleshoot for sure. And that I will also say is another thing of like, I'm working with a stand-up paddleboard athlete right now that has had a history of GI distress and issues, not just because of fueling sources, but also because of there are imbalances in her GI tract. And so part of working with that is figuring out, first off, that needs to get treated and figured out. But then second, what types of fuel sources can she take in that she'll be able to actually eat and absorb without necessarily causing more GI distress. And that's a really tricky one, because depending on what's going on in the gut with the different types of bacteria and stuff like that, it can be difficult to put carbohydrates in. And that's what we fuel the most off of. So anyway, just some different anecdotes there. Muscle cramps or feeling like you're really weak during a workout, like you can't keep up, or like, your performance is starting to decline. That's a really good sign that you're under fueling. And then if a pain or niggle starts to come on after that, then that would be a really, really good sign that you're probably not fueling enough in a workout. Also, the tried and true one is feeling hungry during a workout. If you are not eating enough in your day, and then you also go into a workout underfueled, feeling hungry during a workout is a tried and true sign that you really need to be eating more, not just in your day, but also in your workouts as well. So if you get a pain, like in a muscle, for example, during a workout, and you're also feeling hungry or noticing your performance starting to dip, that pain is probably due to underfueling versus an injury. However, if you are training and that pain keeps coming back over and over again, it's probably worth stopping and going and talking to a practitioner that can do a good and thorough exam and help you figure out what's going on. So that is the episode for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that this was helpful. If you have questions, just like this listener did, I would love to be able to answer them. It's helpful for me to know what you have questions about so that I can make sure that I have topics that are interesting to you. Make sure in order to ask those questions, you can always find either Wisp Sports or I on Instagram and social media. So make sure to follow Wisp Sports on all social media channels, and share this episode with anyone you think may love it or find it helpful. You can also follow me at Dr. Kirstin on Facebook and Instagram, and you can also find me at drkirstin.com. If you'd like to reach us with any comments or questions about this episode, you can at info@wispsports.com, and you can always leave a direct message with us, as I mentioned, and let us know what you think. So thank you for listening, and I will be back next week. Take care.